We're good. Hello. Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Crazy Writer Chicks live event, now to you on Tuesdays, because Tuesdays seem to be, you know what, I'm not even going to put it out there in the universe. Tuesdays are just a good day for this. So we are here this week. As you guys know, my name is Nikki Rome. I've got Rebecca White and Winter Navi with me as usual. But we have a very special guest this week, Beth Willis, who is joining us. Winter dug her up out of her backyard, and she's here to chat with us about all things. All things. Let's just go with all the things. All the things, yes. I actually had met Beth indirectly a couple of years ago. Hey, I mean, no pressure. But Becca stayed close in touch with her over time and asked if she wanted to come and speak with us a little bit about the works and things that she knows about that could really benefit all of us in regards to trauma, childhood trauma, ACEs, so many things. So I don't want to narrow it down. Otherwise, we might miss out on this boat story. But let's get started.
Becca, where were we at that I felt compelled to tell the boat story? Was it at the
We were at Camp Connect, and it was after we were waiting for the kids to finish with their part of camp, and we were, I guess, eating lunch. And you were sitting at the end of the table, and we just listened to you tell us stories for like 45 minutes. And I admit I was slap happy because I wasn't getting enough sleep like normal, but still, I think even if I hadn't been slap happy, I still would have laughed my head off.
I think I had told those stories the night before. We rented a house in Orlando. And well, the first year we went to camp, it was 3 moms, and we had, let me count, 2, 4, I think we had 6 kids in a 2-bedroom condo for a week. It was fun.
Like fun.
Now the next year, yeah, it was a lot of fun. The next year we rented a house with a pool, and it was a 3-bedroom house. And so it was 3 moms, I want to say 18-year-old daughter, and then, yeah, I think 6 kids again. So, yeah, we had told the story the night before, and we were not sleeping. But it's it's sad when you really break it down and look at it. But I guess, is there any other introduction needed before I just dive into this?
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay,
we'll jump right into it all.
It kind of,
because I mean, I didn't do a good job introducing you, so.
Oh, hey, I'm Beth. That's good. Hey, you. My family and I moved to Florida. We came to Ocala in 2013. We've been here since then. I have 2 sons. They are 25 and 17. And after we had been in Ocala for, we moved in June, and then it was the first week of December. I had some distant cousins in Jacksonville, and something happened, some terrible things, and their 2 small children needed a relative within the state to care for them. And I was the only maternal relative. So we took custody. We became kinship caregivers, and they round out my 4 kiddos that I have. And it really, I knew that there were some behaviors and some actions that the girls were having back then. They were 2 and 3. And I couldn't figure out, I knew it wasn't normal. I knew it wasn't, just normal 2 and 3-year-old behavior. And so I would sit up at night and read everything I could get my hands on. And along the way, I met who is now a great friend of mine, Joyce Edler, and her husband. At that time, they were running just a group of parents who were foster adoptive kinship step parents raising kids who had been through some stuff. And a little bit later, they actually created a nonprofit, the Pearl Project. But what happened is I went to one of their first events, and they were talking about ACEs. It used to be called the Empower to Connect Conference, and it was a simulcast throughout the country, and I want to say 50 different countries in the world. And it's brought by the Karen Purvis Institute and I think Show Hope, several different organizations. So that first time that I was there and I heard it and they talked about ACEs and they talked about attachment, I said, this is my life. This is me. They have just ripped my heart open and shown it to the world. And if this is why the things that have happened in my life, if I could have guided that better and learned from this, I'm going to spend the rest of my life telling other people about it. And of course, at that point, I think we had 17 people in the room for that conference. And I told Joy, I said, we need like 17,000 people hearing this. And I scared them a little bit, and so they incorporated into a nonprofit the next year, and we tripled the number of people that we had at the conference. And we provided childcare, I think, for 80 kids. And it wasn't just childcare. It was camp. It was all inclusive. The kiddos were learning TBRI. We were learning TBRI. We wanted to provide mini chair massages. We wanted, everything that the parents needed, make them feel pampered and loved, and just wrap our arms around them for that weekend. So we made it big, and continued, it became a yearly thing, and then COVID. So it started off, Joy was the first, she became a TBRI practitioner, and that just means that we can teach TBRI. And then about a year later, I became one. And since then, gosh, we have 11 practitioners throughout the state of Florida who work with families and kiddos that are struggling or, have experienced trauma in any way, shape, or form. Then we have Joy and I are both trained to facilitate circle of security parenting. And then we've also gone and become trained to facilitate making sense of your worth and anchored, and just recently parenting for positive self-worth. And those are written by Cindy Lee, who's in Oklahoma City. And she has some just fantastic stuff. She was asked to go into a domestic violence shelter and teach TBRI, and it kind of flopped. And they said, well, how can we make this work? And so she wrote Making Sense of Your Worth and Anchored for people who are still in the midst of their trauma, for parents and women in domestic violence shelters. So that's my favorite thing. That's become my favorite thing to facilitate and really get my hands into.
And I'm just sorry. That's because TBRI, which have we said what that actually is?
I don't think I did.
No, trust-based relational intervention.
Can you define that for, yep.
How I define it is I say, this is my 30-second elevator speech. You see kids acting bad behaviors, and you think they're just bad kids. But what it is, they have needs, and they don't know how to express those needs in words because they haven't had reliable, trusting adults pay attention to them or listen to them or care about what they need. So TBRI teaches a trust-based relationship between the kids and the caregivers, and it helps to give the kiddos a voice so that they can say, this is how I feel and this is what I need. And I had this bad behavior because I was thirsty and hungry, and there's too much going on around me. And so how can we look beyond those behaviors and figure out what the baby needs? And that baby is, whether it's a newborn baby or like my 25-year-old son, they're still our babies, no matter how big they are.
And these other programs that you're talking about were designed to help parents who haven't dealt with their own trauma yet. Because you can't take someone where you haven't been, as I understand it, right?
You said it perfectly. We find out so many times that we get triggered by our kids, and it's not about what's going on between. It's not what's going on between me and the kiddo. I mean, I don't want to slap you because you rolled your eyes at me. I want to slap you because if I would have rolled my eyes at my mama, she would have knocked my head off, So it has nothing to do with the relationship that I have with this child. It's about the relationship I had with my mom, 40 years ago. So how do I come to terms with that? How do I find a healing place and really heal myself so that I can have this great relationship with my child and not interact with them in inappropriate ways?
Awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, Joy describes it. She says, in the movie, The Elf, and the elf is in the elevator punching all the buttons. That's our kids. That's how they do us. They love to do that. And they're like, oh, mom's flipped her lid. Mom's flipped her lid. And I'll explain that too. I saw somebody peeking behind you.
Come here, buddy.
So, oh, I have people bringing me
Time to
drinks.
visit.
They're bringing me a dog and a drink. Oh,
That's
so
good
sweet.
service to have dog and drink delivery.
Yeah, I think the dog went back out, but he'll be barking. He usually barks if he can't see me.
Oh, no.
My dog has trauma too.
Because there was ground noise. Let me unmute Winter. Sorry. All right.
Is she there?
So,
Winter was gonna. Oh, I thought you
I
had
don't know.
something to say.
Are you still on a delay, Winter, or are you just sitting there?
Said hi,
smiling
Trooper.
Oh,
I muted your line earlier because there was background noise showing on the little thing, and then I never unmuted you. So
I know. I'm sorry.
y'all are gonna hear me drinking.
You're
So, gulp, gulp, gulp.
there are worse things.
Well, I hope, but anyway, so yeah, trust-based relational intervention, kind of where it came from. There's this woman, and you know, oh, I can't even begin to. She's larger than life to us, but Dr. Karen Purvis. She raised kids. She had been a foster mom, and she raised her own kids. And after they were grown, she went back to school at Texas Christian University. And she started, she finished her undergrad and she went on and went into the doctorate program, doctoral program. And she was working with Dr. David Cross there. And initially they started doing a camp for a group of moms in that area, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, who had adopted internationally. And so the moms really needed some respite. They needed some, just a time for themselves to kind of breathe, and catch up with themselves, because we know caring for kids with emotional trauma, physical trauma, whatever kind of trauma they've experienced, just, hey, a difficult birth, early hospitalization, we know that those things are trauma, the same as some of these bigger things. But she knew that these moms were they were just stressed to no end. So she said, how can we give them a break? Let's do a camp here at TCU. And as they started doing the camp, Dr. Cross was saying, Karen, what are you doing? What are you doing that works? And she said, I don't know. This is how I would interact with children. And later on, she would say, that's how she was as a young girl with animals on her uncle's farm. But what she did, the way that she approached those kids, the way she interacted with them, it got responses, and you saw changes in their, what was going on with them. So Dr. Cross tells it, he says he started following along behind her and doing like ethnographies. He was writing everything that she did, everything she said, her movements, how she interacted, to kind of break it down and see exactly what she was doing that worked, so that, they could present this. They would do cheek swabs from the inside of the cheeks of the kids on the first day of camp. And they would test things like their adrenaline and their cortisol and their dopamine, all the excitatory chemicals. But they also tested things like serotonin and GABA, which we know are the calming chemicals, the chemicals that, oxytocin, that we feel when we feel love, that we feel when, we get these releases of these wonderful chemicals when we're happy, when we're, sharing some wonderful experience with our family. And what they found was those kids, their levels were just through the roof for some of those, the excitatory chemicals. And about the age of 9-10 years old, some of those excitatory chemicals just dropped off. They burn out. Those systems burn out. Those kids could not continue to produce those excitatory chemicals at those great limits for so long. So they continued to test these through the camp, and halfway through the camp, these kids that had just these really high cortisol, adrenaline, I'm not sure of what all it was, but I know those two, they came back into normal range. And so they weren't doing anything. There was no medication. It was, really protein-rich snacks every 2 hours, making sure that they had plenty of water. They were doing sensory activities every 2 hours. They were teaching in a form of play so that they would teach the right way to do things before it became an issue, pre-teaching. And they just saw all of this beautiful behavior just change. And they had kids that by the end of the week, these were kids who had been home for several years from, overseas orphanages. And the moms were coming back and saying, my child's never let me touch them. And last night he climbed in my lap and let me rock him, let me hug him and let me rock him to sleep. And, I asked Dr. Cross when I was becoming a practitioner, I said, why isn't, because we are recommended as promising on the California list of evidence-based practices, and then on the new Title 4E, or there's another one, Title 9E, 4E. It's supposed to be all the evidence-based practices that are beneficial to be used, and then you have to be at least promising on this list to be approved to work anywhere with child welfare in that modality. So it is listed as promising for both of those. And I said, why is it not listed higher? And he said, well, here's the problem. In the families that you've worked with, what is success? What does success look like to you? Well, to us, and I know, you guys know this, it's keeping your child at home instead of an institution somewhere. It's, knowing that your family is safe in the house with that child. It's knowing that your child's not going to harm themselves at 6, 8, 9 years old. And that is true success. But the measures that, these clearinghouses go by are checking boxes and, a pre and a post survey that we're not always able to express the great amount of success that we see. So I get excited when I start talking about TBRI. So ask me questions.
Sorry.
I'm just like, I'm
a
garbage pail spilling out. Yes, ma'am.
Because you've done this for a long time, right? We adopted our 2 in 2020, and there's so many people involved in their lives. And we do TBRI majority of the time, unless I'm losing my mind and I can't think straight to do it right. Then we try and do it later in the day, right? I actually have 2 questions.
Okay.
My first one is, because we've got these kids, they're new to our home, and I think we were constantly looking for trauma behavior when they got here. And we adopted siblings. They came from a home where they lived with a lot of kids, and they never really even interacted as siblings. So even just like a run-of-the-mill sibling fight, we were like, oh my gosh, is this the trauma? Is it the trauma popping out? Is it the... And it wasn't really until we kind of stepped back and we're like, maybe they're just being kids. Like, I know the extreme behaviors we can identify very easily, but the not so extreme behaviors that become repetitive, I guess I don't know what my question is. Is there any straight answer as to how to tell the difference between the two, or do you just apply the same principles to everything you see?
I think, I love what you said about trying to do it and, losing your mind. We all have to, start over and start from scratch. And so part of the TBRI is just saying, have mercy. I know it's said another way, but, have that mercy on yourself. Be forgiving of yourself. Admit to your kids when you make mistakes. Ask their forgiveness. So, have that grace for yourself is what it says. But I think that a lot of times, I know that a lot of the kids that we work with the families, we see siblings and they may not really know how to play. They don't know how to really sit down and have fun. And that's one of the things, that's a symptom of, that's a symptom of what.
Literally their only job was just to get them to throw a ball back and forth from each other for 30 minutes in one session.
Yes.
And we were blessed. It happened fast. But of course, as they start identifying as siblings and playing as siblings, also the sibling rivalry like skyrockets that they've never had before too. And I think that's when we were kind of like, well, I did this with my sister. You know, we fought about the same things. Or, you know, my husband would say that, you know, we were like that as kids too. And so I don't know if we've confused some of it, but I also don't want to overlook any of it, thinking that they are just being normal kids.
I think, I mean, with TBRI, you just kind of, once you learn it, once you start to embrace it, you use it across the board, and it becomes more of who you are. I pick at Joy, she had a negative experience one day at Dunkin' Donuts, and she said she knew that she had fully embraced TBRI because the first thing that she thought about was this person who was rude to her. Gosh, I wonder what her attachment style is. I wonder what it was like for her growing up. What kind of relationship did she have with her mom? And so her heart was going out to her instead of being like, you just, you know, you need some more training. But, you know, she was able to have grace for that person as well. And it is, you see different things with different kids. You might be more attuned to their attachment style. You might be attuned to, like I said, not knowing how to play. They might have nightmares. They might pick, you know, their skin or do things. And you know those things. But then there are other subtle things that they do. I know with mine, they're very good at changing the subject. Or even at a very young age, at 3 or 4, they could change the subject to something else if they didn't want to talk about it or do something. They used potty breaks as you know, potty could be a weapon or it could be a distraction. I think that we visited every toilet between here and Jacksonville at least twice. You know, and they just needed to see what the toilet looked like to make sure it was the same as the one at home. I don't know. But some of that, you know, how much of it is trauma, a trauma response, and how much of it is being a normal 2, 3, 4-year-old. And it could be both. You know, you could have either or both. So like I said, it's better to just do TBRI. Yeah, I think handle it all the same and look at it acceptingly.
My next part of the question is, so as an adult or interacting with other adults, right? You know, I mean, Joy's example was a perfectly good, what Joy went through was a perfectly good example. You know, you immediately start wondering, you become more tolerant, you have just a different outlook on things. But like, you know, if you are someone who has experienced something like this and just shoved it away for a million years, and now maybe you're faced with a child or a spouse or a partner or a boss or someone who's pushing the elevator buttons, right? You know, how can some of this stuff help us get over our own crap?
You know, we would teach TBRI, and when you really get into, you know, several weeks in and you're talking about mindfulness and being aware of your own history and your own triggers, and everybody would say, oh, how do I do that? And we said, you know, you might find a really good counselor, you might, you know, journal, you might do these other things. But I think once we've learned making sense of your worth, it's a way to, during making sense of your worth, we actually go through different lies that you could have been told or negative views that you could have come to believe about yourself because of interactions that you had had with other people. Things like, I'm not good enough. I did something very bad. I'm a bad person. I kept a huge secret. And so we go through this list of lies, and then we go through a list of ways that I might have been made to feel. And then we kind of process these lies. You know, we do different experiential just exercises to help people come to terms with that. And I always say it's very interesting because so many people, when they do this, they start thinking, okay, well, this person made me feel this way. And so you think that what you're exploring is that relationship, but then when it's over, when you're finished with that lesson for the week, you're like, that really made me understand my mom doing XYZ better. Or I have so much more sympathy for my mom or my, whoever my attachment figure is, for what happened. And I think that's so interesting that as we learn more about our own triggers, we have so much more grace for whoever raised us or maybe didn't raise us, who wasn't there. I think, I was raised by my grandmother, and my mom joined the military when I was really young. And I always, I felt like I had some grace for her, but it changed my perspective definitely as to how I looked at what the choices she had made and how she chose to live her life.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really, you can. Oh, I wish I had brought the book. It's very interesting. There was a great book that I was reading. I know I talked about it on the post. When we were training for parenting for positive self-worth, that actually goes in after you do the 8-week making sense of your worth study. You go into another 8-week course, and it's parenting for positive self-worth, and you learn how to share that positive self-worth that you've gained for yourself with your children by parenting them with TBRI. So when we were training, another practitioner shared this book with us, and it was her own she was learning about her attachment style. And attachment style is really just the way that you're parented. And what we know about attachment style is that you have a 75% chance of, or likelihood of, parenting in the same way that your grandmother parented. So unless you make some significant decision to change the way that you parent, your attachment style is going to be the same way that your mother parented you and your grandmother parented back. They know that most of the time it goes with the mother because they're the primary, caregiver for the child, and it's set within the first year of life. But yeah, your attachment style is set, by what happens in those first 12 months. So if the kiddos that we have in our homes, if they were in some type of a disarray in their early life, then they've probably, taken on that, some of those unhealthy attachment styles, and we have to, work through that with them. And you can reteach, and that's why TBRI is so good to do it whether you're certain of the trauma behaviors or not, because we do know that that attachment is there. So this book that I'm talking about, this lady, I can't even remember what her name is, but she wrote it. She had gone to school. She had a 4-year degree, I think, in psychology. And friends came and started telling them about strange situation study, which was I want to say John Bowlby did a lot of research with attachment, and then Mary Ainsworth did strange situation and more research. She went more in depth with that. So those are really some of the founders in the field of attachment. So this woman started hearing about it from other peers and colleagues, and she started researching attachment styles and some of the work that Mary Ainsworth had done in Uganda. And I want to say that was in the 50s. And it just beautiful work that she did with mothers and babies, where she would go into the homes and sit with them once a week for the first 52 weeks of their year, or once a month for the first year of their life, whatever, and make these notes as to how the baby interacted with the mom and how the mom interacted with the baby, and then the happiness of the child, and just watching their growth and their intelligence and their, how fast they walked, how fast they crawled, all of these measurements of growth and knowledge and skill. And so that's really what her attachment research was based on, was some of that she did early on. So this woman encountered it, and she started trying to break down her own attachment style with her mother and that of her daughter. And she was able to address that by researching and writing this book, and really researching more about Mary Ainsworth and kind of the birth of some of the attachment style science that we have now. So it was good stuff. Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Do you remember the name of the book?
No, I posted it on Rebecca, when you
Yeah.
had posted about what we were
On a
reading, that's
Friday
what I
where you
put. And
think I saw
Yeah.
it.
yeah, that
It's there.
I
I
couldn't.
can't remember the name of
If
it.
I
but
click anything, I want to run the risk of everybody, but we'll find it.
Yeah, it might be strange situation, but I'm not certain. It sounds familiar. So it was really good. I mean, it's nonfiction, but I couldn't put it down. I mean, I loved it. Other good things to read, though, about attachment are really anything by Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan Siegel. He is brilliant. He wrote The Whole Brain Child, and those are great. I know people who've listened to those in their car with their kids, and their young kids can grasp the science behind that. He has little cartoons in it, and it makes it so simple. And one of the things that he teaches is like, flip your lid. And we love this because it's about the brain. This is like your hand with a fist like this is about, it's relatable to the shape of your brain. And so we teach about this is the lower brain. And this is, you've got your basic stay alive, do what I got to do. Your frontal lobe portion of your brain are these fingers, and they wrap around. And this is where you can write beautiful music, you can speak multiple languages, you can do high level math, you can do high level science, you can, do all these just brilliant things with your frontal lobe. But then in the center of your brain, about the size of your thumbnail, is your amygdala. And your amygdala is what determines fight, flight, or freeze. And so that is what, when you see someone that has flipped their lid, which is what he says, then they've gone back to their amygdala. And our kids who live with trauma, they have so much experience doing that they just go to it really fast. And once you've completely flipped your lid, it takes about 45 minutes to come back online to really get the calming going and bring this back down so that you can make good decisions and do some executive functioning. So if we have a kid or an individual that's very triggered and angry, we know that when they're here, we can't be giving them a 45-minute speech because they're not hearing us. And I mean, these are beautiful things that we know, and Dan Siegel explains it wonderfully. But this is also, I mean, TBRI and kind of this idea is being taught. We're using it in Department of Juvenile Justice. All of Oklahoma, all of Texas have gone to TBRI. And the state of Florida has recently, they are training 2 facilities. Our first practitioner went for Florida Juvenile Justice, I want to say in maybe October. It hasn't been very long, though. So we're excited about that. That's much healthier. Dr. Cross is actually working with some different police departments around the country to teach a more, holistic view of interacting in situations where we have these, high intensity situations, and how can we teach our police officers to respond, in a more TBRI-like fashion is the only way to say it. Yeah. So I get excited about it. I mean, I think TBRI, it's beautiful. We're teaching it. Some people think that it looks really relaxed and lenient with the kiddos, but we teach them how to use their voice, how to ask for compromises, how to ask for redos. And imagine, I mean, I know when I got my first job, or even when I got married the first time, I did not know how to communicate and ask for compromises with people. So if we're teaching our kids, how to do that, how to speak their voice, and that their voice matters, and important people are safe, important people are listening to them, think about what a better world that'll make. I love it. Oh, books listed by Beth. I'm going to say anything by Dan Siegel.
Oh, it was no. I don't see one. I see 3.
Yeah,
Ashes
it's
to
I'm
Ashes.
just writing things down.
That's not it.
Yeah.
Oh shoot! I just lost it. Hang on, I gotta go back and find it.
No, I'm reading Ashes to Ashes is just like a fiction. If I read fiction, that's purely, I'm going to read that in 1 day or less, pure entertainment. I'm going to zip through it. But if I'm reading something like,
in that
something
same posting,
It was. I think it was. Yeah.
Do you know? Okay, so then the other two were Strange Situation, A Mother's Journey
That's it.
to Attachment.
Yes. Yes,
Bethany
that's it.
Saltman.
Mm-hmm.
So Strange Situation, A Mother's Journey to Attachment by Bethany Saltman. And then there's also Beyond Behavior.
That's Dr. Mona Delahook.
Delahook.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a good one. I didn't capitalize that whole title, but that the one by Dr. Mona Delahook, Beyond Behaviors, and then there's another one. I think it's back there behind me, but there's another one about that's really good if you're having issues with your schools. You know, TBRI is something else. You know, schools are operating with this because if you want to kind of see how that works, I can tell you some documentaries to watch. That the schools that they show are not practicing TBRI, but they're practicing something similar. There's a movie on Amazon. It's called Paper Tigers. Your kids don't need to watch it. It's got some language, okay? But what it is, it's a school, I believe in it. It's in upstate New York, and it's an alternative school. So all these kids have been referred to go there. And what they have is they have a partner somewhere in the school, a teacher, a principal, a counselor, somebody to partner with them. And they meet up with them, you know, every so often. And they have a traffic light on the wall. And the adult says, you know, how are you feeling? And the kid points to the red, yellow, or green as to, you know, how they are. And then they say, okay, well, what can I do? What's going on? Tell me about it. How can I help you? And I mean, these kids have some serious situations. There's kids that are raising their siblings, kids that are working a job to provide for their siblings and their parents. You know, there's a lot of gang activity there, you know, a lot of heavy stuff for these kiddos. And they talk about, they, you know, just go through and show you the lives and the interactions with the kids and the adults. But then they also show you, you know, at the end that this school has a higher graduation rate than the regular schools in that area. I mean, their graduation rate for a type of school like this, you would expect to be really low. Kids dropping out, kids, you know, not finishing. But because they have that personal connection with somebody there in the school, they're doing so much better. That one's a great one. TBRI has it's not made by TBRI, but the director and producer that helps film TBRI, and you can go online and download it for free for your own personal viewing. It's called All Rise for the Good of the Children. And it's All Rise and then a colon for the good of the children. And what it's about is Judge Clark. She has retired now, but she was in Texas, and she used TBRI in her problem-solving court, both drug court, dependency court, anytime, you know, because they had overlaps. And she had a social worker there that worked with her and was a TBRI practitioner. Her name's Jenny. And we've had her on, you know, we've had things and shown the movie, and then had Judge Clark and Jenny on to answer questions. And they are just, you know, they're awesome. But they saw so much success from the people coming through their court program that instead of just checking boxes, they were really working into it and finding out, hey, I've been on heroin since I was 16 because I saw my brother get hung when I was, you know, 5 years old, and never acknowledged that fact, but kept shoving it in and just burying it. And then realizing that, you know, I had all this stuff. And that's, you know, we talk about whether it's a little T or a big T, we've all got it. And you've got to deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, then you're going to find other coping mechanisms that are not so healthy. So that's a lot of mindfulness that we talk about and teach with TBRI. Good stuff. There's another one.
I was just thinking,
go on.
Being exposed to TBRI and how that has, like you've talked about already, changed my perspective on people. I mean, in the heat of the moment, I still might get irritated, but I can be so much more compassionate now, understanding that this is coming from somewhere, especially when it's not my kid that I'm with all the time. Like, it gets harder when you're with someone all the time. But I go to a recovery thing, it's called
Mhm.
Celebrate Recovery, and
Right.
people will give every other week they have a testimony, and I'm telling you, I've yet to hear a testimony by anyone who had any kind of serious issues at all. I mean, like
Mhm.
more than just day to day. Some people, you go for a support group, just day to day stuff. But anyone who had any kind of like addiction or like severe mental anything, always when they start, their story starts very near the beginning with some kind of trauma. Usually a parent
Mhm.
who was substance addicted or abusive, or they were molested by a teacher or a neighbor or whatever, and they never maybe told
Mhm.
anyone a lot of times, like, but there's always this, or their parents, there's one like, were just so incredibly strict.
Yeah.
Like, well, I knew my parents loved me, but like that kind of thing where because it's a kind of abuse, I guess, in a way, to not be able to express or figure out where you're coming from. And I know also, like you said, pre-birth, some of that
Mhm.
trauma can come in too. But I'm thinking specifically in these situations, all these people had these things, and they're going to prison, they're in and out of rehabs, they're accidentally killing
Mhm.
people because they're driving drunk or they're whatever. And
Yeah.
then, oh, well, there was a series of abuses by the neighbor, or there
Mhm.
was, whatever. But people don't seem to see the connection.
No, they don't.
Well,
And
but
it's
they say, well, they can make choice. Well, but everyone has to make their choices. But not everyone is equally capable of making
Mhm.
choices.
Yeah.
You cannot hold people to the same standards as much as you might. Well, you can, but it doesn't work. And studying
Exactly.
things like this can help so much.
Yes,
Like, I wish everyone in ministry and everyone in teaching and everyone in
I do
all of
too.
these things would study this to understand, so they're not treating people the same way, because
Mhm.
they don't need to be treated the same way.
No, no. And I mean, we need to understand that, whether we recognize it or not, everything that happens to you from the minute of conception is going to affect you in some way, shape, or form. If your mother's being abused and she doesn't know how safe she is, she doesn't, have a consistent home, if she's using and she doesn't know where her next high is going to come from, those are stressors, and that mother's body is producing those same chemicals, and that embryo, that baby is bathing in those chemicals, and it's affecting their brain and their body and their biology, and it changes. And we've got to do a better job of teaching this. I mean, little kids need to be aware of this. We need to teach every person in our country how to understand this and how to move forward from it, how to just address it and not continue to look over it and not recognize. And really, when I was talking about Dr. Harris, she's just, I'm trying to remember, she Nadine Burke Harris, she's a doctor in Sacramento, and she had actually done some research work when she was in college, and it was about frogs, tadpoles and frogs. And it was yeah, and they, what they did is they limited the resources that were around the tadpoles as they developed into a full-fledged frog. And so what they did during this research, they realized that if they reduced the water, the natural environment, and the food for these tadpoles early on, that they would grow two heads, they would have three front legs, three back legs, they would have some kind of major distortion. But if it were closer to the time of full development, then they would just develop faster. And that's what we're seeing with our kids. We're seeing really, early puberty, early maturation with boys, and so we see this, we see the trauma. Well, as she went on and she became a physician, she knew that she wanted to work in a poor area of San Francisco and try to, help people. And she didn't really know about, there was a study done I think in the 80s by Kaiser Permanente, and they started off, it was a weight loss study because there was this weight loss doctor and he kept having women who were not, they were plateauing and they wouldn't be able to go on and go below that point and lose their weight. And in most of these women, when he really, got down to business with them and started counseling or of some type, he found out they were victims of sexual abuse. And so this was a symptom of childhood sexual abuse. And so they started this much larger study. And when it first began, it was questions. There were over 200 questions on it. And thousands of people answered. And from those original 200 questions, they've narrowed it down to 10 questions. And it's called the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And you can find a copy of it on the website ACEs Too High, and that's TOOHIGH high.org. And that's available. And then it also talks about, mindfulness and how to overcome. But those 10 ACEs, what we know about that is the majority of the US population has at least one ACE. If you have one ACE, you're like 60% more likely to have two. And don't quote me on that. I don't think it's perfectly right, but a very higher majority to have two. By the time you have 4 ACEs, you can take 20 years off your life expectancy. Okay. Because they know that the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to smoke, to drink, to use drugs, to be obese, to not go to the doctor, on and on and on. And when I saw that, when I heard that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can check every one of those, but like 1 or 2, I've got 8 or 9 ACEs.
Could you give an example of what an ACE, a couple of them? I have a paper somewhere, but I don't know where it is.
Yeah, I usually have it right in my bag, but I don't have it available to me. I don't see it. I want to say it's if anyone in your household had a mental illness before the age of 18, anyone in your household was jailed, they went to prison or were in jail. If you ever witnessed someone push, shove, slap, or physically abuse your mother before the age of 18, if there's 10 questions, and there are those 10 things.
Adoption, early hospitalization. I think we're 2 of them, right?
I'm not certain.
Or foster care, something like that. One of them.
Maybe so. If you were ever removed.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, if you were ever removed.
I think early hospitalization or early severe illness might have been.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to go look it up.
Oh, I should just do it.
I was going to say, can y'all, here it is. Take the ACEs quiz, 5-minute. I'm seeing it on Sisterhood Agenda, which is the first place that came up when I Googled it. But yeah, she found out about this, and she kind of felt, she was like, why have we created this 10-question survey and we're not doing this with every person that goes to the doctor ever? Okay, so the questions are: while you were growing up during the first 18 years of your life, did a parent or other adult in the household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? Yes or no? And each yes is a 1. The second question is: did a parent or other adult in the household often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Question 3, did an adult or a person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or try to actually have oral, anal, or vaginal sex with you? Yes or no? Number 4, did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Number 5, did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? Or were your parents too drunk or high to take care of you or to take you to the doctor if you needed it? 6, were your parents ever separated or divorced? 7, was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or sometimes or often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? 8, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or who used street drugs? 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? And 10, did a household member go to prison? And so based on those, you can answer yes or no. You don't have to share them publicly, but that tells you about yourself. Yes, ma'am. Winner has a question.
I want to delay. But my question, the divorce one, is they were divorced or separated while you were with them, or what if they got divorced before you were born, something like that? Does it still count?
Yeah, you count that. And actually, that the number of separations puts you more at risk because, y'all, I tell jokes all the time. I'm like, my mom and my daddy were both married 5 times, but never to each other, and that's real. That's my life. So, yeah, you're more likely. We know that each time a woman separates from a relationship, she takes a financial hit. So that's going to impact. Some of those original 200 questions were about, the neighborhoods that you lived in and the racial makeup of your neighborhood. If you were a minority, or if you were in a situation where you were uncomfortable in your neighborhood. And so those were part of the original 200 questions. And many people think that we should still talk about those questions and count them, as equally important as these 10 that made it onto this major list. So we know, like that neighborhood that she's working in Sacramento, I mean, she says, the people are brown. And so they see a much higher chance of these things happening. And how she was seeing kids. She would see kids brought into the clinic and they would have extreme asthma attacks. Like 9 years old, had never had an asthma attack. 9 years old, start all of a sudden having these massive asthma attacks. And she started researching and asking the questions, what's going on? What happens? What happens before the asthma attack? And then she asked Mom, well, what has happened? Well, his dad has let somebody that works for him come live with us. And this man keeps the child while I go to the grocery store. He helps me out. Come to find out, he was sexually molesting the child. And that's what brought on the asthma attacks, or that brought on, so yeah. Oh, she's giving us the. And see, I hadn't even told my funny stuff. Y'all want me to tell the boat story?
Go do it now.
Okay. All right, y'all. Like I said, I'm from Mississippi. I was raised in the country. My grandparents raised me. I got married the first time, not because I was not doing it for the right reasons. My grandparents were like, oh my gosh, Beth, that is a white man who still wants something to do with you. You better marry him, girl. Right. So I did. And the first time that I met his sister and his brother-in-law, y'all, I've worried about this. I can just see this going viral. Anyway, the first time I met them, they said, oh, y'all are going to have to come over to the house to eat dinner with us. I said, okay, that would be fine. This was like, we had only been dating a couple months. So she was pregnant and she decided she was going to start cleaning up the house so that we could go over there. Well, they had been married like a year or something. And when they got married, the man's mama, her church and, all that, they gave a bridal shower. Well, they got 14 sets of dishes. You, me, Becca, we'd all take back 12 or 13 sets of those dishes, right? And get something we needed. But their thought process was, I got 14 sets of dishes. That's longer until I have to wash dishes. Okay. So they're going to clean up the house so I can go over there for a barbecue. And they start off trying to put these dirty dishes in the sink, but the sink wasn't big enough to hold them all. So they said, well, what are we going to do? They need to soak because they've got food dried on them. So they took the aluminum fishing boat and they pulled it up to the side of the front porch and they put all the dishes in there and they ran water in it to sit. Now, they didn't have running water because they had gotten the water cut off. So they had the neighbor that lived behind them, they had to cut into their water line and run them a water hose. So they were stealing the water and running the water hose up there to the boat. So this was in about October. The next summer, the next July, and then 14 sets of dishes was still in that fishing boat in the front yard. So, yeah. Now, it's hilarious, but it's sad. You know, it is sad. And I know that they got them out of the house, right? And I know that their mom suffered hugely from depression. And so they grew up in that. And my ex-sister-in-law, yeah, it was normal. My ex-sister-in-law suffered from depression and she had it, and her mother had never been treated for it, never gone to the doctor, never done that. They truly believed that if you were a woman that was married and you wanted a job, you wanted to go to school, you wanted to drive a car, that there was a problem. You know, you were doing something you shouldn't have been. And yeah, I couldn't live like that. So yeah, that was difficult. So, yeah. People still live like that.
So
depression is still it's such a thing.
What did you say, Winter?
Yeah, if you do the test and you want to sort out all that have gone on with you, how do you go about doing that?
Oh gosh, I would tell you contact the Pearl Project and sign up for Making Sense of Your Worth class, but no, we're supposed to only do that with people that are local to us, because if we dig in and we find some really big traumas, you may need some one-on-one counseling. And because you're not local to us, we wouldn't be able to do that. You know, if it is someone local to us, then we could do it on Zoom, but then we would, you know, plug you in with a counselor to further explore some of that. But yeah, I mean, journaling, writing, CBT is sometimes good, but if it's some extreme trauma, it can re-trigger you. So some of that, you know, CBT and journaling can bring back some of those experiences. So Rebecca, you were going to say something about depression.
Well, just how even today it's still so
yeah,
you're not allowed to talk about it, or well, at least in a lot of circles. It seems like, especially in religious circles, it is, you know, you're not a good Christian, or you don't really have faith, or whatever, if you're depressed, because, you know, the joy of the Lord is your strength and all of that. And just how, I don't know, I always try to encourage people to, if you can't talk to the people around you because they're not safe, then find somebody else to talk to, because there are safe people to talk to. And it may not be the people that you wish it was.
Exactly.
But somebody else is better than nobody. And like the ACEs, like Winter was saying, whatever it is, whether it's depression or these other things, to find a lot of insurances cover counseling, at least the lower levels of it, to get started. And there are also, I guess, probably like nonprofit kinds of things, but you wouldn't really know unless you look. But it's worth looking. And if you don't feel comfortable, then don't tell the people around you if you feel like you can't. Like, that's okay. To get started, at least, like, just do what you got to do, because.
And I don't think of it. The joy of the Lord is my strength, and I am a Christian, and I have faith, but I'm going to pray to God and I'm going to ask God to help me. But sometimes I need to, like, I have a counselor that I go to, and I love her, and I just have to go to her and spew garbage, just get it all out and say it and process it and say, okay, this is what I think, but I'm scared if I do this or I make this decision, this is going to happen. And really, you know, I don't need her to tell me the answers. I just need her to listen without me being scared that she's going to judge me. And to find that person, you know, if you go to counseling and you don't click with the first person or the second person or the third person or the 20th person you see, it's hard to find a counselor or a someone that clicks with you. But when you find good mental health, I mean, it's worth gold. So yeah, definitely do something for yourself. Self-care is important, and we need it so much during, we've got so much going on in our world, and there's so much hurt, and there's so much anger, and so much, we've got to love ourselves first before we can love somebody else. And I mean, I feel like I just came and talked for an hour.
That's what we asked you to do.
Well, I think that was the purpose of your visit.
That was, yeah, we wanted that. This is next time for us. Although I feel like I dominated with massive amounts of questions, so sorry.
No, you didn't. You did good.
Good questions.
They were
not
good
at all.
questions.
Definitely enlightening. Beth, I cannot thank you enough for being with us this week. For this last hour, so much great information. Like just enough, I think, to keep everyone a little interested and motivate everyone to look a little deeper into themselves.
And please, anybody that watches,
some of this stuff a while ago,
Might have to have you again.
You get busy with life and you forget how important these things are. So
yeah, especially in the last year or 2 years, we've had so much, turmoil with everything going on. And yeah, you've got to keep yourself. You've got to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I think right now we're living in it. We have no idea what the long-term trauma is going to be for what we've been living for the last year and a half. So I think it's more important now than ever just to get yourself right.
It is definitely. And, we talked about the Pearl Project. If you wonder about that, please like us on social media. And we've got people in, kind of Central Florida, the Panhandle. We've got people several different places. But yeah, like us, see what we're doing. We have a support group that meets. We have different classes, TBRI trainings. And yeah, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're supported totally by donations. We love $10 a month donations. That's what we really run the entire organization with, because we can count on those. And I just want to, my last plug is that the most fulfilling, or the biggest thing that I've ever heard from somebody, as I was facilitating a Making Sense of Your Worth, or Anchored class in our local county jail. There was a lady there in my class, and she sat up and she said, I don't know where you've been all my life, but if somebody would have told me or my family the stuff that you have just taught me, I would not be here, and my family would not be where they are today. And to hear her say that, just yeah, I mean, that I love it. I want to help people and change their lives and teach them to love themselves. So that's that's my joy now. Yeah, it is.
That's awesome.
It is. It's a great medicine for depression. I'll tell you that. Helping other people.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Just so you know, I'm going to have a link to the Pearl Project here. When I get to editing all of our versions, I will include links for some of the stuff that Beth had spoken to us about, some resources she shared as well. But absolutely ahead of the Pearl Project, they were life-changing for me. I know they were for Becca, for a lot of us. They've been able to help a lot of us here in Florida, and now they're expanding all over the place. So any support we can give them, we'd love to do it.
They were life-changing.
But thank you again, Beth. You were absolutely amazing. We are so happy to have you this week. Next week, we're talking about We're talking about bras. Yeah. Should we burn them? Are there alternatives? Many of us are in the camp that we hate them. Many of us aren't even wearing them right now. Leggings are pants. So, we've got some important things to discuss next week about women and women's clothing and what makes us feel comfortable.
Yep.
See you next Tuesday. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. Good night.
Hilarious. Thank y'all so much.
Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.